She wasn't causing a scene. She didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, polite and silent. And yet, just minutes later, security was called. The reason? Because she was a black woman who walked into the first-class area at Cleargate Airport, here in the US. Surrounded by tailored suits and high-end leather luggage, there was a woman in a simple grey sweater pulling a small suitcase behind her, head slightly bowed. And every single pair of eyes turned to look at her. An employee whispered. A manager raised an eyebrow. A panic button was pressed. She didn't know she was being watched, or maybe she did. But she stayed quiet. And then, in full view of dozens of passengers, 2 security officers showed up. They walked toward her, eyes suspicious, hands tight on their radios. But there was something they didn't know. Something only one person in that entire airport was aware of. And the moment she reached for her phone, everything began to change. This isn't just a story about skin color. It's the moment an entire system was forced to stop and wait to see what would happen next. The atmosphere in the VIP boarding zone at Cleargate Airport had its own rhythm. Slow, quiet, and tightly controlled, like a private club. Elena Moore stood in the priority line. One hand held the handle of a worn navy suitcase. The other gripped her phone, displaying an e-ticket. She was dressed simply. A light grey turtleneck sweater, neatly pressed slacks, and low leather shoes. No designer handbags, no flashy jewelry. Her hair was tied back in a neat bun, her expression calm, her eyes clear. But it was that very calmness that made her stand out among people clad in tailored suits, wearing Dior perfume, and scrolling through the latest smartphones. She didn't say a word, didn't make a move. And yet, every pair of eyes seemed to land on her, one by one. No one said anything, but the silence was heavy, like an invisible glass wall separating her from the rest of the line. At the security podium, Patricia Wexler, Senior Aviation Supervisor, was watching. She was large, her flushed skin peeking from the stiff, tight suit she wore like armor. Her eyes didn't scan the whole area. They landed on one exact spot, the woman of color standing quietly at the back of the priority line. Patricia frowned. Her eyes flicked from the suitcase to the shoes to the phone in Elena's hand. Nothing was wrong, but nothing matched her idea of what a first-class passenger should look like, either. She tilted her head and pressed the button on the walkie clipped to her wrist. Delta 7. Check the subject at the end of the priority line. Possible entry into the wrong zone. Her voice was flat, not loud, not soft. Like she had just spotted a suspicious bag on the floor. Eleanor hadn't said a word, but to Patricia, she already looked like a problem that needed to be removed. Elena stepped up to the screening counter. Her shoes made barely a sound on the gleaming floor. Still, no one said a word. Patricia Wexler stood stiffly behind the desk, eyes darting from the screen in front of her to the woman approaching. Elena held out her phone. The electronic ticket was clear. First class, Zone 1. No scan was needed, no verification required. Patricia glanced at it for less than a second, and in that flat tone she'd used to dismiss hundreds of improper guests before, she said, "You may be in the wrong line. Economy is over there." No greeting, no barcode check, no questions asked. Elena's face didn't change. She simply lifted her chin slightly, looked Patricia dead in the eye, and replied, "I know exactly where I'm standing." For a moment, their eyes locked. A silent standoff. Patricia hesitated for half a second. Then, she smiled. A cold smile. Like something from behind a freezer door. She didn't argue. Instead, she tilted her head toward a nearby staff member and gave a small flick of the chin. An unspoken order. Handle it. The young employee stepped forward, reaching out as if to guide Elena away. Eleanor hadn't even moved yet when Patricia leaned in, just enough to whisper a few words under her breath. Not loud, but just loud enough for the nearby staff and Elena to hear. Another reward point upgrade. Thinks having a seat means sitting next to someone who actually belongs here. No one answered. No one reacted. But Elena heard it, clear as day. Still, she didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't pull out ID, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked down at the screen, at the booking code only visible to elite strategic members of the Advalink group. What Patricia didn't know was that the ticket Elena held, unavailable to the public, was issued by the Executive Command Office, bearing a signature found only on internal board-level decisions. And the woman Patricia was trying to remove from the priority lane was the same person who, just yesterday, signed the final approval on a $3.8 billion deal. A deal that saved this airline from a complete buyout. Without Elena's nod, Grand Sky Airlines wouldn't even exist under that name today. But maybe the most terrifying thing wasn't that Elena knew exactly who she was. It was that everyone here had already decided. She couldn't possibly be anyone at all. Elena followed the two security officers into a small, isolated room, one of those spaces where passengers are invited for private questioning. A sign on the door was printed in 3 languages: Security Courtesy Room, Phong Kiem Tra Mem, for internal use only. The room was nearly silent, save for the low hum of the air conditioner and the cold white light shining directly onto the metal table in the center. One of the guards, a man in his 40s, sat across from Elena, flipping open a notebook. Full name: Elena Moore. Destination: business flight to Seattle. Purpose of travel: to conduct an internal review of a strategic partner. Her answers were crisp, open, but offering nothing extra. He scribbled something, then suddenly looked up, voice flat and unblinking. If it's business, why are you dressed so plainly? Eleanor tilted her head slightly. Her gaze was calm, steady. Are you asking if my clothing makes me unqualified? No reply. The second officer, a female guard, reached into Elena's fabric tote bag. Inside, she found only a laptop, a handwritten notebook, and a sealed envelope, closed with red wax, bearing the official emblem of Advalink Group. The guard picked it up, inspecting it like she expected to find something illegal. What's this? Work documents. Can we open it? Elena didn't raise her voice, but every word landed like steel against the thick, unjust air. If you want to read that, you'll need a lawyer and a court order. The male officer froze for a beat. His female colleague cleared her throat softly, a quiet cue to back off. Elena took the envelope, slid it back into her bag, zipped it shut, and sat upright. If this is a random check, please log it accordingly, but if this was requested by someone specific, I want the reason in writing. The room fell into silence. Outside, in the security camera control hub, Patricia Wexler sat slouched in a leather chair, one hand buried in a snack bag. She chewed slowly, eyes locked on the monitor displaying the interrogation room. No words, no blinking. Just that lazy posture, and a face full of quiet satisfaction. What she didn't know was that another wall-mounted camera, not connected to the internal system, had recorded everything. From the condescending stares to the way Patricia sat back, watching another human being be humiliated like it was her afternoon entertainment. After nearly 20 minutes of being randomly screened, Elena walked out of the security room holding a printed slip. No violation. Verified. She didn't look around. She didn't hang her head. She didn't slow her steps. She simply walked, steadily, toward the boarding gate. Patricia was still there, but she said nothing. No apology. She just watched Elena pass by, like a liability that had slipped through her fingers. Elena handed her ticket to the gate agent, a soft green beep. Valid. She stepped through the door, into first class. The cabin air was colder than the AC, cream leather seats, crystal glasses. A faint trail of luxury perfume lingered, but not a single warm glance welcomed her. At seat 1C, Elena found her place. Beside her, in seat 1A, was a white man in his 50s, tailored suit, a faint scent of menthol tobacco clinging to his collar. He glanced at her as she pulled her carry-on overhead, said nothing, but his eyes said everything else. Elena took her seat. Not long after, a familiar figure appeared from the back of the cabin, Chief Flight Attendant, Kelly Wexler, Patricia's cousin, and it wasn't hard to tell. They shared the same eyes. Kelly moved row by row, handing out hot towels, pouring champagne, until she reached Elena's row. Her steps slowed. Her hand shifted the tray aside. Then she walked on. No towel, no greeting, not even a courteous nod. Eleanor wasn't surprised. She simply looked up for a beat, just long enough to remember one more face. The man beside her had just clicked his seatbelt. His lips curled into a smirk. His voice was low, not loud enough to be heard by others, but just loud enough for Elena to catch every word. Guess nowadays anyone with money can squeeze into this world. Elena turned her head. Not angry, not confrontational, just calmly asked, "You think money's all it takes to sit here?" The man froze, caught off guard by her response. Eleanor gave a faint smile, not bitter, just clear-eyed. "If it were that easy, do you think I'd still need money to get here?" No one replied, but Elena knew. It wasn't a question that needed an answer. Kelly returned, placing a glass of water on Elena's tray without a word. No towel, no menu. Elena didn't complain. She didn't ask why. She knew. At this moment, any word would only be twisted by bias. So she sat still, gazing out the window. The plane hadn't moved yet, but somehow, Elena knew this flight was about to enter an airspace no one saw coming. The plane doors began to close. A few passengers were squeezing in last-minute emails. Some checked their meeting schedules. Others sipped champagne, lost in quiet luxury. Elena sat upright, hands resting gently on her lap, eyes forward. She could feel it. Something was still waiting to happen. And then, as if triggered by some unseen signal, Kelly Wexler appeared once again, standing before seat 1C. She leaned in slightly, speaking low, but with the weight of a command. "Excuse me, ma'am. We need to ask you to move to the back row. There's been a last-minute adjustment to the front cabin's weight distribution." Elena didn't look up. She simply asked, soft, but each word crisp and undeniable. "Am I heavier than everyone else in this cabin?" Kelly flinched slightly, blinked, but quickly resumed her cool tone. "This isn't personal. We're just following safety protocol. Your cooperation is appreciated." "I understand," Eleanor replied. "And I'm also following standard internal procedure. So I'll ask again. Why am I the only passenger being asked to move?" Kelly dipped her head slightly, but her tone stayed firm. "We need you to relocate. We're not authorized to provide further explanation." The air grew thick. Nearby passengers began to glance over. A few pretended to read magazines, but their eyes were watching. Elena stared straight into Kelly's eyes, not to challenge, but to make something unmistakably clear. She took a breath, reached calmly into her bag, pulled out her phone, opened the internal app, tapped a blue icon, and typed one single line. Trial complete. Submit file code to corporate. Send. Not a word more. Kelly still hadn't grasped what had just happened, but something in Elena's expression made her instinctively take half a step back. Elena placed the phone on her tray, looked at Kelly one last time, and said, "If this airline truly has a weight problem, maybe it's not the passengers who need relocating." She smiled, softly, but deep, the kind of smile that sticks in someone's throat. Kelly froze. No reply. She turned sharply and walked back toward the galley. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, at the Advalink Group headquarters, a signal decrypted automatically. Level 2 trial complete. Initiate emergency personnel review. And at that moment, no one on the plane realized that the woman they tried to remove from her seat was the very person who held the power to decide who still had a seat on the next flight. The plane landed at 5:34 p.m., right on time. As passengers stood to retrieve their carry-ons, Elena remained seated, hands folded on her lap, eyes forward, as if the flight wasn't over yet. And as she suspected, it wasn't. 3 minutes after the cabin doors opened, a crew member in a navy blue uniform appeared at the front of the plane. He leaned in to whisper something to Chief Flight Attendant Kelly. Kelly nodded, then turned to Elena. "Ms. Moore, please come with us. There's a security issue that needs clarification." No shouting, no handcuffs, just stares, curious, doubtful, whispering, sharp as glass. Elena stood, nodded slightly. No resistance. She was led into an internal investigation room at Cleargate Airport. A small conference space. Dark wood table, swivel chairs, electronic display. Present in the room, the head of security, a representative from Grand Sky Airlines, Chief Flight Attendant Kelly Wexler, and an observer from the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. A printed report sat waiting on the table, labeled Incident Report, Passenger Elena Moore, Disruptive Behavior and Non-Compliance Following Seat Relocation Request, Safety Grounds. Eleanor took her seat, opened her handbag. No rush. Everyone in the room waited, as if expecting her to react like someone accused. But she didn't. She simply pulled out a white envelope, sealed with a distinct red wax emblem, the tri-branch logo of Advalink Group. She placed it on the table, unsealed it slowly, and removed a single page, smooth, premium stock with a faint silver border. Then she looked each person in the eye and began to read. Eleanor Moore, Senior Internal Audit Specialist, authorized by the Board of Mergers and Strategic Affairs, Advalink Group. I have been conducting a covert evaluation of Grand Sky Airlines Customer Experience Protocol. Audit Code 998-X. Scope: Discriminatory Conduct, mid to senior personnel level. Silence. No breathing. No shifting in chairs. The Grand Sky representative opened his mouth, but no words came out. Elena placed the paper on the table, pulled out her phone, turned it to face the FAA observer. The entirety of my random screening at the boarding gate was recorded, using a secondary camera network, including Supervisor Patricia Wexler's baseless command to intervene. This domestic flight was part of a Level 3 field trial, and today, Grand Sky has failed. Kelly Wexler sat frozen. The words she had spoken on the flight, the cold seat reassignment, the empty gestures, the subtle disdain, now echoed like a silent verdict. The FAA observer gave a quiet nod. The Grand Sky rep slowly leaned back, sweat beading at his temples. The head of security spoke first. "Ms. Moore, we sincerely apologize for the mishandling you've endured. An internal investigation will begin immediately, and I assure you—" Elena raised her hand gently. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to see if this system is brave enough to look itself in the mirror." Within 45 minutes of that meeting, an urgent email was dispatched to Grand Sky's executive board. Suspend merger negotiations. Internal ethics compliance audit failed. The woman they tried to escort out of the priority lane was the one holding the power to remove Grand Sky from the National Financial Rescue List altogether. The next day, Grand Sky Airlines received an official letter from the National Financial Merger Board. The $3.8 billion relief proposal will be reconsidered following the completion of an ethics training program, designed by the complainant herself. And once again, Elena Moore's name didn't need to appear, because what she represented was already louder than any business card could ever be. The internal investigation wrapped up in less than 24 hours. Patricia was suspended indefinitely, stripped of her leadership role. Kelly was permanently reassigned, no longer allowed to work first class. Every staff member involved was required to submit a full written report and complete a specialized training course, personally designed by Eleanor. The media moved on. Public interest faded toward the next trending headline. But for those involved, the echo lingered. As for Elena, she gave no interviews, filed no lawsuits, requested no compensation. She sent just one email, which was posted on the airline's internal message board. "I don't need an apology. I only hope they never do this to anyone else." That Saturday afternoon, at Cleargate International, the east hallway of the terminal was unusually quiet. Elena had just finished a private debrief. She stepped into the corridor, heading toward the exit, and there, by pure chance, she saw Patricia. The same woman who had once tried to push her out of the priority line, the one who sneered about reward points like they defined human worth. Now bent over a desk at the emergency assistance counter, sorting papers quietly. Her uniform had changed. No name badge, no executive suit, just a wrinkled light blue shirt and shoulders that now sat lower than Elena's own. Elena walked past without stopping. But then she turned back, not to gloat, not to humiliate, only to look. One final time, directly into the smallness of someone who had lost their own reflection. Patricia felt it. She slowly looked up, couldn't smile, couldn't speak. Elena pressed her lips together, gently. Not with contempt, not with pity. She simply said, "You were right. I don't look like someone who usually sits in first class, because I didn't come here to sit. I came to see how many people in this place still know how to act like human beings." No further words. Eleanor turned and left behind a silence no one dared to break. No one expected that the woman turned away at the boarding gate would be the one to make an entire power structure bow its head. No shouting, no retaliation, just a silence that stood its ground, and a gaze that never blinked. Eleanor didn't need to win. She only needed to make sure they'd never dare do that again, to the next person in line. Because justice isn't always about setting everything right. Sometimes it's making those who once stepped on others walk on their own, in silence, and with the weight of regret. Have you ever witnessed or felt what it's like to be dismissed just because of how you look? Have you ever chosen silence and wondered if it made you weak? Or maybe that very silence became the strongest thing you've ever carried? Share your story in the comments below. You never know. It might inspire the next story we tell. If this video moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Because stories of courage, justice, and quiet humanity are still waiting to be told. I'm your storyteller, and I'll see you in the next story that inspires.